You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from the Encore series, where we revisit past museum programs and conversations. Welcome back to another exciting program revisit on the Encore show. This three-part series features Operation Shadow Game, how the DEA broke the Tijuana Cartel, which originally aired back in 2016. The program features 4 federal agents involved in taking down the Tijuana Cartel, or AFO as it's sometimes called, during a seizure of a drug smuggling vessel in 2006. Part 3 concludes this series and begins with the background of an earlier investigation called Operation United Eagles, which focused on specific targets designated as Consolidated Priority Organization Targets, or CPOT, a multi-agency list of some of the most prolific individuals involved in drug smuggling organizations. Following this discussion is a Q&A with the live audience from the original program. And now for Part 3 of Operation Shadow Game, how the DEA broke the Tijuana Cartel.
My next question's for Manuel. Can you describe how Operation United Eagles got started, what it did, and why it was so important?
Well, right off the bat, I'll start off by saying I'm not as polished a speaker as these guys. These guys were all my mentors. I'm a little bit younger than them.
Oh yeah, rub it in.
Not by much.
A lot younger than some of us.
But, I said, when I joined DEA, these guys had already been identified most of the Arianos, had already conducted all kinds of operations. And, most of my time, that's why I'm not a good speaker, I'd say, because I've always tried to keep under the radar, working undercover, doing other cases. So I'm not used to speaking in front of people, right off the bat. But when I got, after working with DEA for a few years, and I wind up joining, I was asked to help work on the Ariano Felix Task Force in 2003 because, like you said, I spoke Spanish. So, but we had the Ariano Felix, the hotline, Ariano Felix hotline. And this is 2003. Not that it's a long time ago, but, I think crooks always give the U.S. government a lot more credit than what's really out there. They assume that we've got like this bank of operators just waiting to listen for the phone calls, and it's like a telethon or something. In reality, when you call the 1-800 number, I would answer the phone. Amongst trying to work cases and be out on the street and doing everything else, it didn't matter where I was, in a movie theater or whatever with the family. I'd have to step outside and, Ariano Felix Task Force, how may I help you? And so 24/7.
Really? Wow.
And we don't, but we do the job because we believe in the mission. I mean, that's I think a takeaway from, because I feel honored just sitting next to these guys. These guys are legends within DEA, in my opinion. And so I got to help out by obviously working the case, but by answering the phone, we did have a lot of leads and things that would happen, whether it was in Mexico or in the U.S., different events that would happen. Sometimes we'd get, a lot more calls, or we'd get no calls, and we get a lot of, we'll say, non-legitimate calls at 2:00 in the morning, because somebody had a noise complaint. But anyways, so right around Christmas, it was Christmas 2003, I got one of those phone calls that everybody wants. Obviously, if we're answering the phone, we want that good phone call, good information. And we had a call from somebody within the cartel who was tired of basically being a slave, because once you're in the cartel, there's no way out. There's only one way out, I guess you could say. And this person had already survived a couple assassination attempts at the hands of his own bosses for disobeying, we'll say, or for not following orders properly.
Insubordinate.
Yeah, for being insubordinate, because he didn't really want to be involved with what he was doing, or forced to be doing. So again, we get a lot of credit for supposedly having a lot of technology and this and that, but back in 2003, we're still in the basic cellular phones, no smartphones, very limited internet access. I mean, we're lucky to have a couple laptops, I think, in the group, because it was all human intelligence driven for the most part. And again, these guys, no PowerPoints. It was all, right? I mean, it was pre-PowerPoint stuff. I mean, these guys would actually identify people in the old-fashioned way, by being on the ground, being on the street, interviewing people, and doing old-fashioned police work. Not sitting at a computer and like checking a name check, But anyway, so this particular informant, who we nicknamed or codenamed Boom Boom. Another story. We don't have enough time to go into all the stories, but he provided us a radio frequency because the Arianos within the cartel, they were very sophisticated and they did use cellular phones again, but the service wasn't as reliable, I guess you could say, back then. And so they used handheld radios that were based on a trunking system, and not to get into, I guess, the tech stuff, but basically they were more than a regular walkie-talkie. They used a repeater system. Some of the channels were encrypted, and they regularly changed out their radio frequencies because they communicated throughout Tijuana, and I guess it was Tijuana, Playas, all the northern border area of Tijuana, and it was United Eagles. The reason we named the operation United Eagles is because it was the first time that we really got together with the Mexican government to, like, as a unified task force, where we had a 50-man team from Mexico City that was brought to the U.S., brought to San Diego, actually brought to Camp Pendleton, and they were trained in tactical operations. This team had been vetted. They had to pass a vetting process. Most of them were straight out of the Federal Police Academy, so they didn't have a time to be really corrupted or approached by anybody. When they left Mexico, they didn't even know where they were going. They were told they were going on training, and they wound up in the U.S. And they were sequestered on Camp Pendleton for
3 months.
3 months, yeah. 3 months where they were trained in basically like a mini DEA academy.
Crash course.
So when you say they were sequestered, they couldn't call their families because then they could be used as leverage, right?
Exactly. So they were, and a lot of people don't. Again, most of this stuff has now been published, so I guess we can talk about it. But it's hard for me, I guess I'll say, too, to talk about the operation because by us giving up some of our tricks, it makes it harder because obviously the other cartels out there, the other crooks, they study us too, so they see what we were doing. But United Eagles, it was Mexico and the U.S. at our DEA highest levels and Mexico's highest. I mean, directly with the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General of Mexico at the time. This operation was created. We were actually given 2 analysts straight out of Academy that would cross into the U.S. and were at our listening post. We established a listening post, which when we first started consisted of a laptop computer and a basic program that one of our techs, found. Where he found it, I don't know, but because there was nothing set up, there was no equipment set up to intercept airwaves, radio airwaves that we were intercepting because we were getting these frequencies from our informant. Plus, we were also then, once we figured out what frequencies they were using, we were using good old-fashioned police work and switching to different channels and trying to listen for the same voices and listen to
jargon,
the codes that we were annotating on our yellow notebook pads because, again, we were just figuring out what they were up to, what they were doing. And obviously this informant, Boom Boom, gave us a big head start on what to listen, like a primary channel. And from there we had to find I think at one point we were up on over 20 different channels, and they had a very structured command and control system where the enforcers that were on the street only had access to one band. If you were up one level above that, you had another band. As the higher up you were within the organization, you could actually listen to everything that was going on the street day to day. They had different. It was the first time that we got to look into the Arellano Freedoms Organization, what they were actually doing on a day-to-day basis. And
play by play, minute by minute.
Real time,
exactly. And we obviously were familiar with the violence. We're familiar with what they were, as far as how they intimidated people, how they kidnapped people. You know, they were killing other traffickers who weren't paying plaza tax. But it was the first time that we were actually able to listen to them real time and how military-like they were. They were like a presidential detail. They had spotters that would run in taxi cabs and non-marked vehicles. They had females or girlfriends, I guess, driving around the bad guys that were in, you know, the actual cartel member that was in the backseat with, say, a AK-47. They had codes, so we knew if they were carrying an AK-47 or an AR-15 because they talked about long guns or handguns. They're conducting assassinations or planning assassinations. At first, we didn't know enough because of the codes that they were using, and there were hundreds of codes that by the time we were done with the operation that lasted over a year, we figured out like what part of town they were talking about, because they never just said, we're going to go to the Walmart or anything like that. It was always like, we're going to go to the whatever. They made up some code. So it took some time, but we figured out, we had a map, right? A map of Tijuana where we hand wrote the codes on, and so we could actually try and thwart some of their operations by dealing with our vetted team, that we had from Mexico City. Well, there was a different safe house team, right, at that time. Not the actual tactical team that we were training at Camp Pendleton. Mm-hmm. But we would reach out to some trusted counterparts and try and give them a heads up if there was going to be a murder, if there was going to be a kidnapping, and try and thwart those. And so United Eagles, I guess in 2004, one of the culminating events was we were able, through the intercepts, we were able to figure out where a couple of the safe houses were being utilized by Efraín Pérez Pasuengo and Jorge Aureliano Felix, who were lieutenants within the AFO. And so we identified two primary locations where they used to get together maybe once every couple of weeks, once a week, they'd get together and just, I guess, talk about business or watch a soccer game, because we were intercepting this. So we figured out that, you know, while everybody is out on the street, you know, kidnapping, torturing, doing, you know, the terrible things that they did, the bosses would, you know, have a beer watching a soccer game, you know, relaxing. So by identifying, and again, throughout this process, it's not just us. Not the four of us. I'd like to reiterate that.
Absolutely.
We had a big team helping us at any given time, and 10 or more agents. We had FBI. We had a couple, I think HSI, well, it wasn't HSI back then. It was ICE, Customs, Legacy Customs. We had the U.S. Marshals, who were very instrumental in actually bringing us into the modern times, by actually providing us communications so that we could communicate amongst each other securely. But the U.S. Marshals brought their expertise to the table on how to, what they do is hunt criminals, fugitives. So again, thanks to the U.S. Marshals, they helped us, guide us also, and we're able to identify, like I said, these two locations, primary locations, and we had the team at that point that was had done their 3-month training and were ready to go back and see their families, because they didn't, they hadn't signed up for that. Anyways, we also had to help them with their weapons, because they couldn't even bring their the Mexican government, because they feared leaks within their own organizations.
Their own government.
They could not just send people, say, to Tijuana with 50 AR-15s or tactical
The
equipment.
Arianos had lookouts at the airport, at the POEs, and a lot of times some of the officials would report to them. So they would fly the agents either to other border cities and then have them picked up and met in San Diego. And then we smuggled them back into Mexico, and including some of their equipment, so that they wouldn't tip their hand that, hey, there's going to be an operation, and we don't know who the targets are.
Yeah. So we had to compartmentalize even what we were doing along with the Mexicans and help them basically equip. And I think DEA purchased a lot of the tactical equipment for them, vests, helmets, because the Mexican government didn't have the budget to be able to provide everything that they needed. So once we figured out that they were going to, their EFRA and Macumba were actually going to be at one location, we had the team basically gave them the layout, instructed them, and they were able to actually successfully arrest both of them at that house. So regarding like United Eagles, I guess after that it kept going, and we were able to figure out about the boat that they were going to purchase, because obviously the
Operation Shadow Game.
It led to Operation Shadow Game, exactly. Because I don't know if stop there.
Well, Juan, would you like to chime in on Operation Shadow Game?
Sure. And of course, I just want to synopsize that in Operation United Eagles, it was actually a headquarters initiated concept, and they decided to procure the funding, and then they realized they wanted to do this because of all the great intelligence that all the agents in the field had developed, because we had real life frequencies that we could monitor. And I remember the very first time that we actually got a radio that we could program the frequencies into. I remember being married to that radio for like a year, and I would listen to it day and night, weekends, holidays, and just listening to the command voices, the inflections, realize their strong points or weaknesses, until we broke it down. Then we decided we can't do this just one-on-one, so we developed this listening post, and we started expanding to many more frequencies, and we found out that the cartel at any given time had at least 1,000 members. 1,000 members, because every lieutenant had at least 5 or 6 cells, and every cell had at least 10, 15 members. And of those 10, 15 made members, they had another 5, 10 wannabes who were their lookouts, their sicarios, you name it. So it was an extremely, extremely organized organization that was scary to find out. At one time, one not even that high level member called for assistance when he thought he was being followed, and he was being followed by a marked unit that didn't know what they were doing. They assumed they had a suspect, but not that he was an Ariano member. And the cartel, within 5 minutes, had about 100 members surrounding that area, and they were ready to hurt the cop if he did anything against the guy who called for help. And they realized, I know this guy, and they just told, hey, familia, just moved out. Point being that with all this intelligence, the United Eagles was a way to put it to work. And so we brought in the counterparts. Not only did we train them, we conducted listening posts, developed all the intelligence. We found out where they would be at the key points, and so many different people contributed and added their skill craft, their knowledge of, we combined it with the human intelligence to eventually lead to these successes. And in doing so, when we had these listening posts that were listening to all these recordings of all these calls, many times, and I don't know if it was just by lack of knowledge or desire, or counterparts would get a little difficult in that we would have to, we're in the listening post and we're hearing calls live, but as they're getting more and more, it'd be garbled if you listen to all of them at the same time. So people started using headphones, and I would be asking my Mexican counterparts who are in the same listening post, hey, so what's going on? I need some real live information. I need to tell the operations people to get busy on something. Or, we have to send it to Mexico City, and then they vet it and they send it to the embassy, and the embassy sends it back to you. I said, why do we need to do that when I'm here and you're here? I go, I need it real time right now. Well, everything, or at least in my philosophy, so much of life is timing and luck and delivery. This young agent, Mexican counterpart, is listening, and all of a sudden she takes off her headphones and she says, ¿Qué dice? So I put on the headphone, and this is one of the Gus Rivera, whom you were speaking of earlier. He's a Mexican American who's raised in San Diego. He speaks a lot better English than he does Spanish, and he's talking to one of his subordinates and giving him the specifications on a yacht that the boss wants, and he basically tells him everything to the T of what the Doc Holliday became, which was the boat in which they were arrested. So my partner at the time was Rudy Maldonado, very bright agent, doing really well, and he decides, well, I'm going to get on the internet and see how many of those boats there is in the U.S. We found 2 in the entire country. One was in Houston, and the other was in Long Beach. So that put us on the track of the Doc Holliday initially. Other sequential and subsequent events gave us more emphasis on the Doc Holliday, and from there forward, we followed it until it led to the great success of Shadow Game, which was Alan was out there for months at a time, and many other agents, including myself, would rotate in and out of the port of La Paz down in Baja Sur. It was tough duty, trust me. But we had to pretend and act like we were tourists. But eventually,
A lot of langosta, a lot of lobster.
That was a tough sell.
ceviche is delicious. Point being that eventually the production was not there, and most of the bosses were looking at the expense it was costing to be out there, and if not for luck, eventually these guys finally tripped out far enough into international waters, and we didn't really know who was on the boat, but a cutter was close by, and we said, hey.
This is a Coast Guard cutter, right?
Right, yeah. So let's roll the dice, and other people gave the green light, but eventually it was very successful when we caught Javier, and hence Shadow Game up there, and it was just luck, I think.
Coast Guard cutter Monsoon.
Was that?
Monsoon.
But I think it took, aside from luck, you have to have, I think, preparation and training and being ready for when luck strikes is very key to the success. And we've had many others like that with counterparts who have done the right thing at the right time, when sometimes it's a roll of the dice. And oftentimes we say amongst ourselves, sometimes we'd love to have that every counterpart is honest. We've seen that not all of them are, but if we find out who they're aligned with, we can use them against the others, and that's worked as well. And I would consider it a chess match. It's been a chess match entire career working out there, because you not only have to pick what targets you're going after, the ones you have developed the most intelligence against, but likewise, who are you going to use? What operational entity are you going to use to affect it? Are they going to do the right thing, or is it going to be there's nobody there? And later on, you end up arresting the target maybe months, weeks, or years later, and they'll tell you, oh man, you were close to me, you almost had me. But that cost me $150,000, and that's on you as it was. You were lucky.
Yeah. What is it? The old adage: the criminal has to get lucky every day. Law enforcement just has to get lucky.
Exactly. Yeah.
The force advantage, as Michael Kenny would say. The state has the force advantage. Well, we've got we're at the end of our time for the formal. I'm just going to give a quick concluding thought. There's a great success in Operation Shadow Game. El Tigrillo goes down. 2 years later, the Ariano Felix organization has been fairly decapitated, and there's a split within the organization between El Teo and El Ingeniero, the nephew of the Arianos who inherited the organization. And that's a very violent, bloody period between 2008 and 2010. And so that's part of the unintended consequences. Sometimes we have these successes, and then there's fragmentation within these organizations, and violence goes up. We've got to take some questions. And I hope one of those questions is for Juan to talk about the current status of what's going on in Tijuana Plaza. That's what I'm excited to hear. We ran out of time. So we've got Alyssa over there ready with the microphone for questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm sure we could talk about this for, like days, right? But when you broke them, like on that ship, were you interdicting product, or was it because they had warrants out on them that you were able to get the top leadership of the organization, or, in all this killing and intimidation, when did they have time to sell product? I've heard very little about that. So I'm thinking, okay, so this network marketing organization they had did all that for them, and they spent all their time And I guess they were also intimidating every single one of these cops, right? They couldn't all be born bad.
Oh, no, of course not. No, specifically, Javier Arellano had a provisional arrest warrant against him from indictments in San Diego. But additionally, he had warrants in Mexico, and so did Arturo Villarreal, who was also on the boat with him, and Cesar Niebla, who was also, I mean, these guys were, you don't go fishing with the boss unless you're a very high-level member of the cartel. And these guys were probably some of the most ruthless killers that you could ever imagine. These guys would kill on a whim, kidnap, murder, so that therefore they had plenty of warrants. There was no PC. And it was strictly a manhunt for an arrest. As far as trafficking is concerned, towards the end of Javier Arellano's tenure as the cartel boss, they had very little narcotics. They had to be stealing narcotics from other cartels who were operating in their AOR. We know that they would try to conduct major narcotics purchasing ventures in South America, Central America, and they were failing because of the notoriety of their bloodbaths. No one would trust them, no one would deal with them because they figured, I'm not going to get paid. These guys are just going to steal my products. So nobody wanted to work with them because they were no longer gentlemen. They were just viewed upon as a thug rogue cartel.
A quick note about the Doc Holliday operation. We had success against the high-level cartel figures down in Mexico before, affecting their arrest through our counterparts. So at those points, they were grabbed in Mexico, taken to a Mexican prison, and then the extradition process started. We couldn't get our hands on them. This, we planned from the very beginning to try to get this cartel leader in international waters. That way we wouldn't have to go through Mexico and their extradition process. We could bring him straight to the U.S. and prosecute him, and that's what we did.
My question actually did have to do with extradition, and I was curious if any of these folks were charged in U.S. courts or are incarcerated in U.S. courts, and if not, is there going to be any extradition reform so that future or current cartel leaders who commit crimes on both sides of the border will see justice?
Well, this picture was taken in the process of the extradition when the post-haste extradition when he got picked up in international waters, but many others have been extradited, and I believe every brother.
The AFO, almost all the leadership that was arrested in Mexico resides currently in the U.S.
Correct.
It took in U.S. prisons.
Yeah.
We're still awaiting for Gustavo Rivera. He still hasn't been extradited. But both
That's the brother.
Yeah, all brothers are either dead or in custody in the United States. All the 5 that we were concerned with.
And a quick point about that, the Calderon administration, they made that a major point, was to increase the number of extraditions as kind of a weapon. And also, the Supreme Court in Mexico ruled, I think it was 2001, that solely Mexican citizens, not people holding dual citizenship, could be extradited to the United States. And that was an important point. And right around that time, Chapo Guzman escaped the first time.
And extradition. Extradition, when somebody gets picked up, we have to have a provisional arrest warrant for them in Mexico. And Mexico has to have it in Mexico City. Once that provisional arrest warrant is acted upon, we have to get together our extradition packet. And in that packet, we give up our case. 3 informants, an affidavit from 3 of our witnesses, an affidavit from the case agent, an affidavit from the prosecutor. And then it takes forever. Years for them to finally literally come up. And when they finally do, the gig's up, they come to the United States. I want to talk. Let's just say most of these guys want to talk. Not all of them are given the opportunity to talk, but they're not as tough as they seem to be. They put their family first once they get here.
He's a millionaire.
He's a rich man.
He's a rich man. He's in the U.S., safe, alive.
He had there were several orders to kill him. I knew him 5 minutes and I wanted to kill him. He just has that kind of personality. It kills me. He's a millionaire. But he did a lot. He did a lot of good. 2
of the high-value targets that we arrested behind his information, each of them had a $2 million reward price on their head. And he was lucky to roll the dice. He got 2 of them together in one shot. So he got $4 million off the top.
Yeah, and that's another, just on informants, the way the cartel, intimidates people is they tell even their workers, every informant gets killed, this and that. I mean, knock on wood, but all our informants, for the most part, always safe. I think there was one at the very beginning a long time ago before I joined, and he just happened to be the wrong place at the wrong time. But throughout this case, we didn't have anybody, informants-wise, killed or harmed. And if we did find out that anybody was going to be harmed, we always took steps to intervene and make sure that they were safe. So,
which happened more than once on the listing post.
Many times, but because we were able to hear the name or figure out who they were talking about, we were able to save that person before they actually got killed.
But on the downside of that, Manny, these people are attached to you at the hip for the rest of your life. They never forget you. They trust you. They like you. They respect you. And they're always calling you when they have problems. So you inherit them as your stepchildren. Yeah. And so we have guys from 1980s that are still calling us. And sometimes our bosses don't understand. You have to forget about this case. Manny, you have to forget about this case. I can't. The witnesses are still calling me. The victims are still calling me.
Do what I did.
I've got to be there for them, or else they're not going to testify, because we still have guys out there. So we all have our stepchildren that will not let us alone. And there comes a time in your life when your wife finally tells you, you know what, turn off your cell phone or else I'm leaving. So it comes to that at sometimes.
It's funny you say it. I actually got a package in the mail one day at the office, and it was no, it was a witness or a family member of an informant who they were safe, let's put it that way. But we had, I guess, such a positive impact on them that they had no family in the U.S. They wanted me to basically agree that if anything happened to them, I would be their kid's guardian. And it's an honor, obviously, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, we really can't do that. It's a conflict of interest. But yeah, I guess, like you said, people, they trust us.
One of our partners that couldn't be here because she's in South America, Rosalinda, she's spent a lot of time on this case since 2004. And like Manny, she's of Mexican descent. She knows the culture very well on both sides of the border, and she's abused because of that talent. But one of the kingpin's daughters really took a liking to her, really looked up to her because she was this badass cop that arrested her father and was actually writing, essays about her in high school, wanted to be like her. And it's very flattering, because once these guys are extradited, once their families are extradited, you are their number one fan. It's not their defense attorney. It's not anybody but the prosecutor and the case agents on the case.
It's like the Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
Because you advocate for them to the prosecutor, to the judge, that they are cooperating. So maybe you should be a little more lenient in the sentencing.
Yeah. And each of the agents on the case has that passion and compassion for people, and has that talent to make people do the right things, and to preserve the witnesses and the victims in the case. And not every cop can do that. Not every person has the patience or wants to do that, wants to ruin his family, or wants to ruin all that productive time. But, there's a lot of us that have worked this case that couldn't be here, that have that talent. And those are the kind of people that put these types of cases together. You have to be in for the long haul, and you have to make some tough decisions, even when the bosses want you to do something else.
We got another question up there.
Can you guys discuss a little bit about the impact working this case had on your families? And also, a second part, what kind of safety issues affected you guys, like your personal safety while you were in Mexico or even in San Diego with working with such a violent cartel?
I still live in Mexico, so I'm very proper in everything I say and do, because I don't want retaliation. It is very, I guess, challenging. We use a lot of what we call tradecraft. Never go home, be followed, never say any more than you have to or anything that's going to compromise you on the phone. And just be very careful in everything we do. But as far as the impact, I'd like to think the only one that it's impacted is me. I'm pretty high strung, and sometimes I'm accused of being a little hostile sometimes. But it's just because I'm always on the edge, and I live on the edge, and I've been on the edge for so long, 33 years now, that I don't know how not to act like that. But as far as impacting my family, I got to thank the Lord that they are beautiful, wonderful, and that is why I keep doing what I do, because they inspire me. This is the type of family I've always wanted for myself, and this is why, and families like the gentleman before me, this is why we do what we do, so that there is an existence of that type of lifestyle in America or anywhere else, that we protect the innocent, the good, and that's who we represent. I was just talking to my son. He just joined law enforcement. He got a tattoo, something representative of what we do, and St. Michael, suppressing evil, with the sword in his hand, just looking out, being his brother's shepherd. And I think everyone here feels the same way. And that's, at least I don't know of any tragedies amongst any one of our families here. Everyone's doing extremely well because we're so passionate as well at home as we are at work.
I've got to say, 2 of my kids are cops. My father was a cop. 2 of my kids work for the San Diego Police Department. And they made me extremely proud to follow in my footsteps, and they know how much fun I've had and how adventuresome it's been in my career. So, I mean, it's made me proud. And I still have my wife after 32 years. Thank God. And I have a beautiful family. So, and that's one thing, I think all of us have had long marriages, and we have healthy families. So
30 here.
we do keep things in perspective. And I think, I don't know, maybe that has something to do with success
It does.
in cases too.
It has everything to do with success.
Yeah, like Juan says. Yeah, I mean, the wives are the unsung heroes, I guess, because they put up with the long hours, the TDYs, us being, when you're working an operation, you could be gone, everything from 2 weeks, a month, more.
Drinking in the pause.
Yeah. No, and the fact is that we're not allowed to talk about things at home, but we don't. You keep work, and home life is different. Try and turn it off. I don't know if you really can or not, but the fact is that trying to keep the family separate from work, and
you try to.
I think what Juan says is like it doesn't. I've thought about it too, whether it affects my family or not. The fact, I think, is that because we are in law enforcement, I mean, the family, they all know how to shoot. They all know how to be careful, how to not expose themselves, whether it's,
Thick-skinned.
Thick-skinned, yeah, but not, be careful what's put on the internet. Tradecraft, we'll call it that. But so I think our families, even though we don't try and, not like hide them, but they do live under a different set of rules, no Facebook, no, things like that, a little different.
When I worked in Tijuana, I worked there for 2 years and I moved back to San Diego. I love the work down there. I love the challenge of what we were doing. I left my family in San Diego when I went down there. We had the option to move them down there. My 2 boys were young, like 8 and 10. So I had to live down there. The State Department provides housing when you work overseas. But I was close enough to my house in San Diego that most nights I could take the 35, 40-minute drive from Tijuana up to my house, have dinner with my wife and kids, put them to bed. Then I'd have to drive back down to Tijuana to go to bed because there were only 2 agents down there at the time, and it was a security issue. So I did that for 2 years. And again, I would like to have stayed in Tijuana because like these guys have mentioned, we're passionate about what we're doing. But it was pretty difficult on the family. I like to think that it was negligible impact. My boys grew up, they're fine, upstanding citizens, very proud of both of them. But as much as we try to keep it from having an impact, it leaks out. I mean, it leaks, there's seepage.
So I have one last question. Juan, can you bring us up to speed? So after El Teo goes down in 2010, Sinaloa moves in. Can you tell us about Sinaloa and now the cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación that's moving into the Tijuana Plaza?
Sure. So Javier gets arrested in the Operation Shadow Gang in 2006.
August 06.
And from then on, the nephew, who'd been groomed his whole life, he actually was raised, he's almost the same age as Javier. He's a daughter of Isabel. he grows up in the family business and he takes over the cartel. Well, just then it splinters off. Mael Liguera Guerrero, whom Alan spoke of earlier, he's in prison. He wasn't supported or assisted by the remaining cartel outside, mainly the brothers. So he gets recruited by the Sinaloa cartel while in custody. And he calls his brother, whom basically inherited all his operational cells. Now Theo's running them. And he tells them, hey, we're no longer with the AFO because they did nothing for me while I was in custody. And Sinaloa's coming in. Either join with them or they're going to take you out as well. And the cartel was so weakened that Theo said, I'm with the winning side, bro. So if we're going against the AFO, then bring it. And he ended up getting more support from Sinaloa. And that's when the actual push to physically take over the cartel. Prior to that, they had strategically removed all the heads through informants, or many times Mexican law enforcement conducted very key arrests as well. Now, it all just happened to be perfect timing, but at the end of the day, that's what they did. They eliminated the organized crime aspect and became disorganized, and it was a lot easier to defeat. So AFO basically only lasted, I'd say, 2 or 3 years after Javier's arrest, and then Sinaloa took over it, and they made a truce with Ingeniero. That's what his code name was, or Alineador. When the cartel was in full bloom, he was the guy who's like the operator of the radio frequencies, and he would decide oftentimes who lived, who died, who got kidnapped, who didn't. And he aligned who covered what territory and who's going to work with whom. So that's why his nickname. But he gave all that up in order to have a truce, and I'm sure that truce came with some significant amount of money. And so everything was peaceful and passive for quite some time until, let's say, 2010, 2011, you start seeing indicators of a new cartel coming around, the Cartel de Jalisco, Nueva Generación. And they have this gentleman's agreement where they're going to get along. And it continued, and they continued growing more. And we just saw the borders become inundated with a lot more crystal meth, fentanyl, heroin, cocaine. And during the last years of the reign of the AFO, the only thing that would get seized at the borders was marijuana, and not even that big of an amount. Ever since AFO got pushed out, Sinaloa and the Cartel de Jalisco took over. You guys hear about the tunnels all the time, and major tonnage getting seized on both sides of the border. Major money seizures of several $1 million in just in one stash house alone. Caches of weapons. So basically, you had a poor cartel that got pushed out with a rich cartel with many resources took over. But as human nature would take its course, there's always greed, and there's always people who want to be the top dog. And like the old cliche, there can only be one rooster in the chicken coop. These cartel bosses, start pushing each other out. So right now there's a turf war in Tijuana between the Cartel de Jalisco and the Sinaloa cartel when they actually initially came in together. And now they splintered off, and they're fighting for even the local trafficking zones there in Tijuana, and they're killing each other off. Earlier, I believe it was Steve who said that Logan Heights gang members were getting paid $15,000, $20,000 per murder. Right now, I just read a report from Tijuana Police Intelligence that I share information with. They're paying 2,000 pesos, which is
less than $200.
It's about $130. That's for a homicide. So, and these guys are the lowest level. And what's happened is that a lot of the immigration laws have changed in the U.S. and they're sending out all the ex-felons, deporting them into Mexico, and they end up in Tijuana, and they have no livelihood. Some of them don't even speak Spanish because they've been in the U.S. illegally for so long as children they cross, and now they're in Mexico, so they start, selling dope and kidnapping and killing for a living. And so life is real cheap right now in Mexico.
Wow.
At least in Tijuana.
Wow. So I've heard people saying that the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, in Mexico. Do you think Sinaloa is still top dog, or is it in flux now?
Well, I'd hate to draw a target right now. It depends on who's going to see this show. But the truth is that at least it depends on what part of the country. I would say that in Sinaloa, it's still obviously the Sinaloa cartel. in Jalisco, Michoacán, and Guerrero, it's probably Cartel de Jalisco. As far as Tijuana, or I don't speak of Tijuana alone, our area responsibility from the Tijuana Council, we cover all the way to Cabo San Lucas. So you take La Paz and Cabo San Lucas area, it's run by a faction of the Arturo Beltran Leiva cartel. If you come up north in Mexicali, still run by Sinaloa. Tecates between Cartel de Jalisco and Sinaloa. Tijuana is between Cartel de Jalisco, Sinaloa, and remnants of the AFO. Playa de Tijuana and Ensenada is more like Cartel de Jalisco. And in this whole process, there's many, many people who have switched teams 3 or 4 times. And they are just traffickers by nature in this. They work for the highest bidder. So at any given day, they could be working for the Sinaloa cartel, killing AFO people or Cartel de Jalisco people, and all of a sudden they get offered more money with better benefits and higher rank in another cartel, and they'll switch, they'll flip-flop. So it's very unstable as far as unorganized crime is concerned.
That concludes this edition of Encore, where we revisited Operation Shadow Game, how the DEA broke the Tijuana Cartel, which aired back in 2016. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll check back with us for our other shows, Law and Disorder and Lifeline on Wednesdays, and Icons on Tuesdays for a new Precinct 444 episode. Next Wednesday, we have a special guest, Andrew Whiting, the Senior Vice President and Chief Sales Officer with Mission Square Financial, the exclusive sponsor of the Memorial Fund's Ambassador Program, sits down to talk about the importance of financial planning as it pertains to those in public service. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you have a healthy and safe holiday season. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.